Wow, it's been a while since we've done this. Who's actually happy to be back? All right, that's cool, that's cool. So the series we're going to do, what I'm up here, the series we're going to be doing for the month of September through October is called Jesus, the God Who Interrupts. And the whole idea behind this series is this. Let's say that you're walking one path in life. If Jesus were to show up on the path of life that you're walking, and he wanted to interrupt that path and put you on a different path of life, would you be willing to listen to him? So to give you a story behind this, there was this guy living in this country, and my microphone is messing with me really bad. That's messed up. Sorry. Okay, that's better. So anyways, so what happens, you have this guy, he's living in this country, and war breaks out in this country, another country invades his country, and he is terrified, and what he does, he's trying to get wheat, because he wants to make food, but he's scared that his enemy's going to find him. So while he's in his country, terrified of this foreign enemy, he's trying to get wheat. He's trying to put it in like a secret place. He's trying to be all secretive about this. And his name was Gideon. And when Gideon is doing all this, we get to this verse right here. Judges chapter 6, verse 12. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And okay, so you're saying, okay, so I said we're going to call this series Jesus, the God that interrupts. Why am I talking about the angel of the Lord? Why am I talking about the Old Testament? But here's something to keep in mind, that Jesus is God, that Jesus just didn't show up in the New Testament, but there's never been a time when Jesus did not exist. Because Jesus is God, he is throughout the entire Bible. So at times when you see this phrase, the angel of the Lord, it could be a reference to Jesus in the Old Testament. So that's how we look at this. So you have Gideon, he's hiding, and Jesus shows up, and Jesus looks at Gideon, and he says, "You mighty warrior." And the big idea behind this is this, that when we see Gideon, he's looking like a coward because he's hiding and he's scared. But when Jesus sees Gideon, he just doesn't see Gideon as a coward. He sees the potential in Gideon, and he says, "Gideon, you mighty warrior, you have no idea what I am going to do in your life." So tonight's whole lesson is this. In this series, Jesus, the God who interrupts, tonight's main point is this. Slide. Remember what Jesus thinks of you. Remember what Jesus thinks of you. Because as you go through this school year, you might have incredible highs, you might have incredible lows, but the thing to remember is, what does Jesus think of you? Which brings us to this story, the story of Moses. And maybe if you grew up in church, what ends up happening, once you hear Moses, you know his entire story. You know about the guy that parted the Red Sea. You know about the guy that did all the miracles in Egypt. And because you get so familiar with these stories, you forget that Moses was a real person. You forget Moses had a real struggle. You forget Moses was like me and you, and God had to help him out in life too. So let's look at his story. Next slide. So what's happening here, you have Moses, and this is before he does the miracles or everything, that he's hiding in the desert for 40 years. Does anyone know why Moses is hiding for 40 years in the desert? Luke. Yeah, because he killed an Egyptian. So what ended up happening, Moses killed an Egyptian, and he goes in hiding for 40 years, and then God shows up, the angel of the Lord appears in a burning bush, and he starts having a conversation with Moses, and this is what Jesus says to Moses in the Old Testament. Verse 10, "So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" The point I want you to get from this verse will be this slide. Moses struggled with self-image. Moses struggled with self-image. Let's go back to those verses. Because often this is what happens, right? You have God, he sees what's happening in Egypt, and God says, I have this big plan. I want to do something really big. And he looked at Moses and says, Moses, I want you to be the guy to do what I want to do in this world. So the same thing happens to me and you, that God sees a problem, God sees a situation, and God says, I can't wait to act in this situation, and I want to use you. So what ends up happening, we do the same thing that Moses did. Moses said, wait, who am I? Whoa, that's way too big of an opportunity, right? There's no way I can do this. And that's what me and you end up doing, that God sees a situation and God wants to use us, but we struggle with our self-image. We struggle with what can we really do, what God is asking me, and then we pull away from opportunities just like Moses did. Let's go to the next issue Moses struggled with. Okay, so Exodus chapter 3, verse 13, it says this. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your father has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I tell them? What shall I tell them? So what is Moses struggling with here? Slide. Moses struggled with not only self-image, he struggled not really knowing who God is. Not really knowing who God is. How do we see that? Go back. Look what's happening here. Suppose I go to the Israelites. Suppose I listen to you, God. So suppose I do what you want me to say, right? What do I say to them? The God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Like, God, I don't know you. That for some of us, right, we want to do what God has called us to do, but the problem is this, the struggle is this, can I really trust God? And the reason why we ask that question, can I really trust you? Because there's areas in my heart, there's areas in your heart where we really question the goodness of God. That we really question, is God really who he says he is? Is he really the God I read about in books? Is he really the God I sing about? So those struggles that keep you from serving God were the same struggles Moses had. Okay, what else did Moses struggle with? Slide. Exodus chapter 4, verse 1. And Moses answered back to God, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say the Lord did not appear to you? Slide. Moses struggled with not only self-image, not really knowing who God is, fearing failure. Fearing failure. Maybe that's one of the top reasons why we don't follow God. What if it doesn't work out? What if it doesn't work out? Which brings me to this point right here. Next verse. Exodus chapter 4, verse 10. And I think this is where we're getting to the heart of Moses right here. Remember, Moses was a real person who had a real struggle with the real God. And this is what he says. Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." So what is Moses struggling with here? Let's go to the next slide. Moses struggled with, what if people laugh at me? What if people laugh at me? How do we know that? Moses is saying, look, I can't speak well, right? That I'm slow of tongue, that maybe I stutter, right? That if I were to go and do what you said, people are going to pick on me. I remember being back in college and being at Liberty University. They brought in this guy to speak to us in chapel. You know, it's like, I don't know, 5,000 students. We're all in this room. And there's this guy, he has special needs. That when he talks, he stumbles horribly, and he walks with a limp. And I'll never forget what he said. He was talking about Moses, and he brought up this point. And he said, you have no idea how true that is. That maybe one of the top reasons why we don't follow God, we don't want to get picked on. No one enjoys getting picked on. But I want you to see this. All the struggles that Moses went through are the same struggles you go through. And what does God do? Like, what does God say to Moses? Because Moses has all these issues with his self-worth. And me and you, we have those same exact struggles. And when those struggles hit you, what do you have to do? Remember, what does God think of you? What is God's answer? Let's go to the next slide. God's answer to Moses, if you were to take all of Moses' problems and all of his issues, this is what he says to him. God's answer to Moses, he said, "But I will be with you, and this shall be a sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." So if you were to take God's answer, right, and you were to boil it down, what is God saying to Moses, and what is he saying to me and you? He's saying this: Moses, I'm going to be with you, and not only am I going to be with you, I'm going to see you through everything I'm calling you to. Right? That's God's answer to Moses. That's God's answer to me. That's God's answer to you. God's answer is this: if I am calling you to something, not only will I be with you, I will see you to it through the very end. Which brings us to this verse right here, a verse that I want you to remember, that if there's only one verse you memorize your entire time in youth group, this is the verse I want you to grab. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago." That I want that verse to sink into your hearts. When Jesus looks at you, he says, "You are my masterpiece." And not only are you his masterpiece, Jesus says this: "I have planned good things for you to do. And the good things I have planned for you to do, I planned them long ago, that before you ever existed, I planned for you to do really good things in this world." So my question to you is this, or the question is this: how do we do these things? How do we do these things? You can do something if God has called you to it. If God has called you to it, he will help you. Because what Moses is going through, he has all these reasons why he can't do it. And here's the promise: if God has called you to do something, he will see you through it. And there's two beliefs on this, right? So some of this gets into God's plan for your life. And there's two ways people look at this. Either God gives you abilities that you don't normally have to accomplish the good things he's called you to do, or God simply takes everything that is already inside of you and he simply brings it out for you to do those good things. And I don't know which answer is true. I do know this, though. If God's called you to do something, how do you find those opportunities? Walk into the opportunities God has given you. If God has put opportunities in your life, walk in those opportunities and you'll see God do good things. And the reason why I kind of wanted to speed through everything tonight is this. By all rights, I shouldn't be here. But by all rights, I should not be your youth pastor. Here's why. Here's the obvious reason. Most churches don't hire people that don't look like them, right? And when it comes to the church world, a lot of black churches don't hire white guys. A lot of white churches don't hire black guys, right? So the reason why I'm here is because God wanted that. So let me tell you a little bit about my story. I'm here because the only reason why I'm here, because it was God's will. So let me tell you this. When I was 3 years old, my parents got a divorce. So at 3 years old, my parents, they separate, and that caused just a lot of pain in my heart that I kind of deal with today. But also, shortly after my parents got divorced, I got something called meningitis. And once I had meningitis, the doctors actually thought I was going to die, right? That's how bad it was, that I was supposed to die, like at 3 years old. But by God's hand, I didn't die. I made it. You can actually clap for that. I didn't die. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Survived that. But here's what happened. My motor skills were completely messed up. What do I mean by that? That my ability to write, my ability to talk, my ability to hear, they were messed up severely. So, you know how people joke about people like, dude, you're too dumb past kindergarten? You know how people joke about that? I can never laugh at that because I actually had to repeat kindergarten. That's how bad it was. So whenever someone jokes about like someone failing kindergarten, I want to laugh, but I'm like, oh, wait, that's me. And, okay, wow, that's actually on the internet, so that's out there now. So the reason why I had to repeat kindergarten, because remember, my motor skills were messed up. I really couldn't hear. And when I talked, the teachers couldn't understand me, and I couldn't understand the teachers, and my motor skills were messed up. So then I had to repeat kindergarten, and not only that, I was taken out of regular classrooms, and I was put in special ed classrooms. So that's what happened. And I remember the doctors told my mom, later she would tell me, the doctors said, hey, your son, he will never be in regular classrooms. Your son, this is who he's going to be in life. He's never going to learn to talk well. He's never going to get school. It's not going to happen, right? So that's what the doctors told my mom. That's what the doctors told my parents. And I went through that from up to 6th grade, like really just special ed classes. And then for some reason, in 8th grade, I went to a private school, went to a Christian school, and for some reason, things began to click, that I became like really academic oriented, and I was getting A's and B's. Maybe this is a lot about the Christian school, I don't know. But anyway, Christian schools are great. Don't hate on Christian schools, love them. But so I got voted like most academic in that school. And then after that, that's when I really encountered Jesus and God, and I began writing sermons and things like that. And I remember I gave a presentation on heaven and hell one day, and I remember I had teachers, they would look at me and they say, hey, Daryl, there's something special about you, that God wants to do something in your life. But then the more I did that, the less popular, okay, I wasn't popular to begin with, right? But I became even less popular than what I was then. So then I had this struggle. Do I really want to follow God, or do I want to be accepted by my classmates? And I said, I'd rather be accepted by my classmates than really do what Jesus wants me to do. And that's one of my biggest regrets right there. And so for some of you, I know that's your struggle this year. For some of you, like, you are ready to just break out spiritually, but you are terrified if you do that as an 8th grader, if you do that as a senior, if you do that as a 7th grader, 6th grader, hey, I'm not going to have friends. I get that struggle. That was my struggle. So then I just fell in with the crowd, right? So that I really didn't care about pursuing God or Jesus really. But by the time I was 17 years old, at 17, I moved out of my mom's house, and I moved in with my dad, and that brought some good things, and that brought different struggles. Okay, so how many of you actually argue with your parents? Anyone? Show of hands. Actually, wait, don't do that. They're going to see this online. They'll try and help you out. Well, me and my dad, we actually fought each other. Like, okay, we actually had a wrestling match one day that was that bad in my home life, and my dad was 20 years Navy, military, so I obviously lost horribly. But moving on, that was part of the bad living with my dad. Part of the good was I found a youth group, and I never went to youth group before, and it was the summer before my senior year in high school. I went to this youth group. And for some reason, all this Bible knowledge flowed out of me on the very first night, and the youth pastor did this. Right? And then, for some reason, on Saturday nights, does anyone know who Billy Graham is? Okay, so Saturday nights, when most people were out doing whatever, I was at home watching Billy Graham crusades. And here's something I'm embarrassed to say, because Billy Graham is like one of the world's greatest preachers ever. I was watching Billy Graham on Saturday nights at 17 years old, and I said, I could do that. I know it was wrong, it was bad. Sorry, Billy, right? But anyways, so then in that youth group, I got opportunities to preach, and I got opportunities to grow into my calling, and that's when I felt God calling me as a pastor. And some of you might think I'm a really good preacher. Others of you might not think that, but let me tell you one of my first sermons. So I'm in this church, and I guess I am preaching. You think I preach long now? I guess I preached really long in that one church because the worship pastor of that church got on the piano and began playing, and I was only on point number 2 in my sermon, and he was playing really loud, like louder than I could talk. So then I said, okay, maybe I need to speak louder. So I spoke louder than he played louder. And that was like me auditioning for a play, like I didn't make the cut. So then I just closed my Bible, said a prayer, I got out of that church as fast as I could, right? So why do I tell you all these stories is this. I wouldn't be here unless this was the good thing that God planned for me to do. And I remember this. When you feel incredibly low, always go back to the special places in your heart. When you feel incredibly low, always go to those special places in your heart where you and God go. And I'll remember this. I was an intern at a church in college, and it was my last year with my mentor, and we were at this camp, and I remember we were walking out. It was like night sky, and he said this. He says, Daryl, I always want you to remember this. God's hand is on your life. No matter what happens to you in life, I want you to remember this. God's hand is on your life. You guys, I want you to remember this. God's hand is on your life. And because that's true, I'm going to skip some of seminary. I ended up here, right? And I thought there's no way I'm going to get hired because I had zero pastoral experience. I was just an intern in 2 churches. And I said, this church has like 500 people. I don't look like anyone in the church. There's no way they're going to hire. Okay, I didn't know the Dara lines were here. Sorry. But I didn't know I was going to get hired, right? So then I thought my resume was more like a joke. And then I got hired, and I did this. Huh? You know like how a dog chases a car, but the dog would have no idea what to do if it ever caught the car? That was me. Right? I was chasing after a church, but then if I got hired, I had no idea what I was really going to do, and then I got hired. And then my first year here was interesting. That's the best way to say that. So I remember the days where it was really good. I remember when days it was really bad, and there was days I thought, there's no way I can do this. And I remember driving up here when no one was in the office, and I just went to my office, I sat at my desk, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? That was an incredibly low moment. But in that low moment, I went back to that moment with me and my mentor, and him saying this, Daryl, God's hand is on your life. In other words, when you think really low of yourself, remember, what does Jesus think of you? Guys, Jesus wants to interrupt your life. For some of you, you are on a course of life that Jesus wants to interrupt, and he wants to put you on a different path. And the question is this. When you feel really low, when you feel like you can't do what Jesus wants you to do, remember what he thinks of you and the potential he sees in you. The very last verse I'm going to show you is this. After God is talking with Moses, it says this, "Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses." And I'm not trying to end this on a downer or anything. I want to end this upbeat. Why was God so angry at Moses? This is why. God said, "Moses, do you know what I want to do in your life? Do you see like how big these problems are? There are people suffering. There are people dying in this world. And Moses, I want to use you to be a game changer. And you're telling me all these reasons why you can't do it. And people are hurting because you're wasting time arguing with me." God's anger was tied to his love. For some of you in this room, God's anger is there on you, not because he's mean, not because he's frustrated with you, but it's this. God is saying, I want to do so much stinking good through you, and you're holding me up. Guys, if you have that type of God's anger on you, that's a good thing, because that's God saying, I want to make a difference in this world, and I want to use you to make that difference. So here's the thing. You don't have to figure out the next 5 or 20 years of your life. That's not what this series is about. This series is simply this. How do we help you find the next couple steps? And my question to you is this. Are you willing to let Jesus interrupt your life? I'm going to pray and ask the band to come back up. Dear Jesus, we thank you for tonight, and we thank you for this, that if you have called us to something, you will see us through it. And you did that through Gideon's life. You did that through Moses' life. You've done that through my life. And if you've done it through my life, I know you want to do it in their lives. And I pray for that the people in this room, that they have all these struggles with their self-image, or they struggle with people laughing at them, or they struggle with getting picked on, that I pray that they would remember what you think of them. I pray that you would just help them get over their fear, and that they would allow you to interrupt their lives. We love you, and we give this prayer in your name. Amen.